secondary hours. Next is capital D. This is going to be that caretaker of a 3-month exemption from work requirements. So if you're a person who is taking care of a child from age 0 to 3 months of years, you do not, and you are the main caretaker, you are not required to do the work requirements as set out in the paragraphs before. And then it identifies who cannot claim that. So in this case, I see you're taking care of 3 months, but this. And so those persons do not get to claim that exemption and must meet the federal or the work requirements. On capital E, we talk about work experience placements shall be reviewed after 90 days and are limited to 6 months, 24 per lifetime limit. They're reviewed regardless of the length of the time in the work site. So that's just an additional work placement requirement. And then capital F talks about TANF participants or recipients with disabilities and the type of work requirements that are required for them. And yeah, so they have to have specific documentation that details their ability to engage in employment and any limitations that they may have in such employments. And so that is applicable to TANF recipients with disabilities. And then next, you have this struck language that says non-cooperation is the failure of an applicant or recipient to comply with requirements. That is the same as the definition in 39.702. So that was also struck when changes were made to the bill last year because that's just redundant language since it's already being defined. So that paragraph, capital G, next, talks about only TANF non-cooperation for the work program. So thinking about the paragraphs that we've been through, here are the work requirements. Well, if you don't comply with those work requirements, here are now the penalties. And so that logically flows into that. Next, we continue with ineligibility for TANF benefits, because if you think about that logical line that each of these sections are trying to go through, you've complied, but yet at the end, you may be ineligible at this point if you do this. And so that paragraph 7 becomes, if you do not cooperate with child support services, here are those penalties. And so the child support services, remember, are if you're receiving benefits, you must work with child support services to receive payments that are owed to you as child support payments. And then later on, those are important because those payments are later assigned on over to the secretary, and that's going to be a subsection later. So you have all this stricken language if you're in the red and blue one. On page, yes.
Can we go back? And it's more just helping me kind of get my understanding aligned with the columns of proposed and current. And just so make sure I'm seeing what you're describing.
Yes.
On page 8, down at the bottom, very bottom, number 9, individuals who have not cooperated, that struck through language. Once again, where that would be B9, is that correct?
So current statutory language, that would be B9, yes. So this takes those who have not cooperated with TANF work programs, it makes them ineligible for food assistance programs. So that language is now included under the food assistance subsection in regards to what makes people ineligible to receive food assistance. And so if I go to the chart, B9 can be found at subsection C1 cap E. So that subsection C is going to be the food assistance subsection. And so since you're already not complying with TANF work requirements, then you also become ineligible for food assistance. So that is included in the food assistance subsection, because that is the program you're becoming ineligible to receive benefits for. Correct. Page 17, at the very bottom.
So very good. And sorry if I'm not following exactly the column. So if I look on the proposed, what would I look for to show, what would I look for to find that struck through from the current in the proposed?
Yeah, so if you are identifying a paragraph or a section by its old statutory identification or designation, which in this case is a subsection B9, you'll want to go to the column on the right that says current. And so you'll want to find B9. That one is not in order. Yep,
Okay,
correct.
that makes simple, good sense.
Yeah, that is something I can provide to the committee later, is this table just flip-flopped. But the one I have right now is not updated to reflect the current draft.
Any questions, committee? We're good. All right, thanks, Jesse.
Sure. Page 9, we're going to see a new paragraph 7, which is that non-cooperation with child support services. The committee should be familiar with that, as those items were discussed last year. And then you will have a few pages of that struck language. And you will find a new paragraph 8, which used to be B14. This is prohibitions on uses of TANF dollars. So TANF recipients cannot use such dollars on alcohol, cigarettes, lottery, etc. So this paragraph relates to what those benefits can be used for. And then you have a few more pages of struck language. And that's all that struck language, absent a few items identified already, should be appearing in all that new blue. So we will make up for all that struck language we went through with the blue in the next few pages. So here at the bottom of page 16 in the blue and red document, you have a new subsection C. And so with the signpost, you see that this is the food assistance program subsection. So paragraph 1, cap A, it talks about income standards for the food assistance program, and it talks about a state option that the state has elected to put in about what and what can't be counted with the income eligibility. So you will find that in 1 cap A, in cap B, in cap C. So these are all items that are already in the statute that determines and limits how the secretary determines those income eligibility requirements for the food assistance program. Additionally, in D, you'll see it's another eligibility requirement, and that requirement relates to your citizenship status. You must be a citizen or meet qualified non-citizen status determined by the USDA, which is the federal agency that oversees the food assistance program. Capital E after that is going to also be a paragraph about eligibility. So this is the one we discussed earlier, that if, you've gone through the TANF process, you're now applying for food assistance process, because sometimes, as this committee has heard, applications can be simultaneously seen by the secretary, and that's when these determinations, they already know this, so then they get to this conclusion. So if the secretary has this application, they already know this person is not doing these work requirements, then the system identifies them, and under this would identify them as also ineligible for food assistance. So once the system has identified ineligibility due to the TANF work requirements, you see this ineligibility for the food assistance program. So that is capital E. Capital F is individuals who have not cooperated with child support services. They are ineligible to participate in the food assistance program. So this one, unlike the child care subsidy and the TANF program, have penalties. This one at the end of the paragraph, you can see the period of disqualification of it ends once it's been determined that the individual is cooperating with the child support services. So once the individual on food assistance is cooperating, then they shall begin receiving the food assistance benefit again. And that is also another determination of eligibility and on that spectrum of when eligible and when ineligible. So 2 identifies the next step, once you've done all these eligibility requirements, of the work requirements. So each food assistance household member that is not exempt shall register for work, participate in employment and training, accept employment, and not, quit such job. So, for example, some input that the committee could provide on this draft would be, this is a perfect place, 2A, where you could make this another list. So you could do requirement shall, 1, register for work. 2, participate in an employment and training. C, accept a suitable employment offer. And D, not voluntarily quit a job. So that's something the committee could consider. This is something that I've done, with other sections.
So maybe that's a good point to stop and just talk through the idea. So when I asked Jesse and David to restructure the statute, the goal once again was not to change anything. So it appears that even when you see these opportunities to even break a paragraph out into a list, you really wanted to maintain the integrity of the paragraphs, even the whole structure, to where, am I correct in that you did not even break things out to list, and you kept the integrity of paragraph by paragraph and the general?
There are some paragraphs in here where the paragraph has been broken into that list. This is one instance in which that was not done. No reason not to or to keep as is. When breaking out into a list, that does not change any of the policy or the implementation of that language.
And would it be your recommendation and preference to break it out in a list for ease of reading and reference?
I would say that breaking that out into a list would be consistent with the rest of the bill draft.
So just question the committee. So the purpose of this meeting is just to see what Jesse and David have done, and then one, to offer our thoughts, recommendations on how to organize it maybe a little bit better, but also to take opportunities like this to say, well, is there any objection to breaking things out into lists where it seems like it would be more reasonable? Like the list, I would be in favor. Representative Roth.
Well, just for a quick view, breaking it out makes it really simple, just as you did previously as well. This seems to be a little shorter, so it could, you don't get as lost in these shorter increments than you do. But for consistency, I would suggest listing it out, because it doesn't change anything. It just makes it easier when you look at it. You can just see boom, boom, boom what it is, and as opposed to having to read the whole paragraph.
Representative Lewis.
Yeah, I just point out, you can get a comparison by looking at on page 18B after A. I mean, there it's broken out. That's what it would look like if they changed A. And I agree that it would make it easier to read.
And I think on WebEx, Representative Meyer, you have a question?
Not a question. I just, thank you, Mr. Chair, by the way. I just wanted to say that I do agree that maybe it would be easier to read if it was consistent with the rest of the bill draft in the way that it's listed. So I think that it would be a good idea to rework that section in order to create a list as it is in the other sections.
Sounds good, thank you. And that seems what everybody seems to be in favor of. Representative Johnson?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just look at our name, Welfare Reform Committee. That's why we were formed, to reform some things and to fix them, and I think this is excellent. Thank you.
No, the work's impressive. Takes a lot to put order to things, so definitely can see the amount of time. So yeah, I think in this case for sure, and then if there's other ones that you run into that are the same concept where it's all grouped, a lot of different things are grouped in a paragraph, and you see the need to put it in a list, or to see the convenience. Is that all right to give the revisers flexibility to make lists where lists seem appropriate? All right, you got it. Thanks, Jesse.
Thank you. Below that is capital B, which is the penalties for non-cooperation with work requirements of the food assistance program. So if you are a recipient of food assistance and you are not complying with the above paragraphs on the work requirements, below are the penalties for that and when you may be able to receive that benefit again. Next is going to be the work, employment, and training requirements. So this is the Kansas, or DCF shall assign individuals subject under the Federal Act to employment and training, and that applies to able-bodied adults, 18 through 49, work registrants, 50 through 59, and C, individuals who are not employed that 30 hours per week. So if that sounds familiar to the committee, this is language that was added last year during the legislative session. Next, we have a prohibition also on the dollars received by recipients. Well, this is actually a prohibition on the secretary on what those funds can be used. So they can't be used to promote or buy advertisements related to food assistance programs. So the secretary or anyone who has access to these funds cannot use such funds on advertising the food assistance program. So that would be the end of that food assistance, subsection B. So subsection D is the next one, and that tackles our third public assistance program in the statute, which is the child care subsidy program. We discussed that last year as well. So this one is a little shorter than the other one, but anything referenced to the child care subsidy program has been reorganized into this subsection D now. So the statutory language allows the Secretary for DCF to adopt rules and regulations for determining eligibility for that child care subsidy program. It includes, that income eligibility. So in addition to A, the first subsection, which is the general requirements, then you go down to this specific public assistance program, and we have our eligibility requirement there, which is dependent on what the secretary has put in rules and regulations. And then determining and maintaining eligibility for this child care subsidy has a work requirement. So as you can see, there's kind of a pattern to each of these individual public assistance subsections. We're talking about income eligibility, eligibility for the program, and then kind of the work requirements, and then the penalties, for not abiding by requirements in that section. So this follows that kind of, that order that the rest of the subsections have been going through. So determining and maintaining eligibility requires that there is an employment of 20 hours per week. And then it lists the exemptions of those who may receive a child care subsidy benefit, but do not have to work those 20 hours. So you have the list adults, due to a physical or mental condition, former TANF recipients who need child care for employment after their TANF case is closed, adult parents included in a case where the only child receiving benefits is a child of a minor parent, and that minor parent is in school, adults who are participating in food and assistant employment training, adults who are participants in early Head Start child care, adults who are caretakers of a child in custody of the secretary. So those are people that are exempted from that 20-hour work week. And then the next paragraph talks about DCF putting together and providing child care for recipients of the child care subsidy if they are pursuing any sort of degree or certification that leads to employment after obtaining such degree, and then it has requirements in that paragraph. This paragraph was not identified as one that could be logically broke out into a list. It would require some more, wordsmithing. And so in order to keep the integrity of this paragraph, you see that this longer paragraph is still intact. Next, the period of ineligibility for child care subsidy based on parents' non-cooperation with child support services. So this is a section this committee dealt with last session as well. So a recipient becomes ineligible of child care subsidy if the person is not compliant with child support services. And then it has the list of those penalties. And then what this committee and the legislature did last session is they put in these periodic reviews. So the secretary or the secretary's designee shall review child support compliance of the parent at these specific dates. So when they apply after the 12 months of continuous eligibility, if you remember, that was something coming down from the federal government to DCF that they had to extend child care subsidy for 12 months without interrupting that. And so that's why that exists in there. And then the next point of compliance review by the secretary would be when the secretary renews or determines a parent's eligibility for that child care subsidy, which occurs kind of every 12 months. So those three sections are specific items in the 39709 statute that relates to TANF, food assistance, and child care subsidies. These next three sections that I'm going to go through are general sections that within them may apply to only one or two of the programs, but for sake of subject matter, they have been grouped this way. So this next one is all the provisions in 39709 that deal with fraud investigations. So Kansas Department of Children and Family shall conduct an electronic check for false information, for TANF, food assistance, and child care subsidy. The department shall verify the identity of the adults. The next paragraph is upon that check, a person may be ineligible for benefits if they are found guilty of a crime of theft. And that is, so for 2A, that's just TANF. And then B is TANF, but then C, you can see TANF or food assistance. So in those paragraphs, they have, if convicted or committed fraud, here's what specifically program is identified with that in that conviction. So next you have any individual, and for reference, I am on the blue and red document. I'm on page 22, and I'm at the bottom where it starts paragraph 3. Any individual who has failed to cooperate with a fraud investigation shall be ineligible to participate. So if a fraud investigation has commenced, a person is not cooperating, they'll be ineligible to receive cash assistance and that child care subsidy. And then the next few pages should be so these next few pages talk about, and with some grace, these next few paragraphs should be in the drug screenings paragraph as I'm going over and reading them. So that 3 and then C, D, E, F, G, through that should all be under that next subsection of F, drug screenings and convictions. So that would be not appearing in that subsection, but rather in subsection F. But at the top of page 23, at the end of subsection E, you have paragraph 4, which talks about children and families maintaining a sufficient level of fraud investigative staff. So that speaks directly to fraud and hence included in that subsection E. So the next subsection is going to be subsection F. And with some time to review and get back with a second draft, you will see that all those items under paragraph 3 in the last subsection should be and will be included in this subsection. And so they were mistakenly put in the wrong subsection.
Sorry, can you, apologize for not following that. Can you identify the page and
Yes.
the location?
So what I am talking about is on page 22. At the bottom, you have paragraph 3. Oh. And this is because mine isn't stapled together. So. Okay, so it is in the correct place. And I was very ready to throw myself under the bus there. So on page 22, at the bottom, you have paragraph 3. And that's any individual who has failed to cooperate with a fraud investigation through it determines that such individual is, and then on to page 23 is cooperating with the fraud investigation. And then you go straight to paragraph 4. So everything in the fraud investigation subsection E, relates to fraud. And so next, you have subsection F. And so everything in that deals with drug screenings and drug convictions and eligibility.
So as you have it is correct.
Yes.
Good.
What you have in front of you is correct, depending on what the committee would like to change. So that F1A is a program of drug screening for applicants of cash assistance. That Cap B below on page 23 also relates to cash assistance. C, D, E, F, G, H are all related to eligibility for cash assistance, which, as a reminder, is the TANF assistance benefit. And then 2A goes on to state that if a person tests positive through that drug screening and they have a dependent child who is receiving benefits, they may choose someone else to then receive the benefits on behalf of that child, so that child maintains and continues to receive that benefit. So that's what 2A is. And 2B then states that new appointed person to receive such benefits will then also be subject to the drug screening as well. And then in C and D, it talks about if that person who's appointed that is now subject to drug screening, tests positive, what the secretary and the next steps are. Okay, paragraph 3, so on page 26, paragraph 3, it talks about a person that has been convicted of a felony, and that offense is related to the manufacture, cultivation, distribution, possession, or use of a controlled substance or controlled substance analog at a certain day, shall be ineligible to receive cash assistance. So that's paragraph 3. And then paragraph 4A, we're starting to talk about a person who's convicted of a felony that's mirroring the one in paragraph 3, how they'll be rendered ineligible for food assistance, and how the secretary shall not provide food assistance to a person convicted of a felony for an offense that's a manufacture, cultivation, distribution, possession of a controlled substance or controlled substance analog. And then additionally, in that 4BI, it talks about that person, specifically for food assistance, may be eligible again if the individual enrolls in and participates in a drug treatment program approved by the secretary. So that I, 2I, 3I talks about the process of that person in that drug treatment program, and how they may be eligible for food assistance only in this case. Paragraph 5 is language that gives the Secretary of DCF the power to adopt rules and regulations to carry out this subsection. So when it says this subsection, this gives the Secretary power to do rules and regulations for the drug screening and conviction subsection. So it doesn't mean everything. It doesn't give full authority to regulate everything. It gives authority to do rules and regulations for that subsection of drug screening and convictions. It also states that any authority granted to the secretary is in addition to other penalties prescribed by the law. So this is in addition to the general criminal code. So, if a person is convicted under the criminal code, the secretary, that does not take away authority of the secretary to render that person ineligible for some benefits. And then paragraph 7 has some definitions that's specifically for that subsection. So if you're wondering what a controlled substance is or a controlled substance analog, those are the definitions for that. Next, you have subsection H, which is this is the assignment of support rights and limited power of attorney. So practically, when a child or a young adult is in the custody of the secretary, and there's no more, either parental rights have been terminated or the parent has been determined unfit, that parent becomes no longer eligible to receive benefits for that child. When that child goes into custody, those benefits then are provided to the secretary for that child. And so this is all existing language. These were generally their own subsections, and they're grouped together as 1, 2, 3, and 4, stating the support rights to such benefits shall be transferred to the secretary if so child is in custody of the secretary. And they go over, how to assign those rights over, what that process is, and any limited power of attorney that gives the secretary as they take care of and have such child in their custody. Next is subsection I. This relates to an electronic benefits card. So any benefits under the statute that a person uses an electronic benefits card for, these are going to be statutory requirements for such card. So, for example, we can see it's a statutory requirement in 1 to put a photograph of the recipient on the card. In 2, The card is valid for voting reasons. 3, it requires that the DCF monitor requests for additional cards, or if there's any suspicious activity, and whether or not that should be forwarded on to a fraud investigation unit. And then 4 is the definition for Kansas Benefits Card. So this is any card issued to provide food assistance, cash assistance, or child care assistance, which are the 3 programs that we've discussed above. And then what you can see next is J. So this is, there's no red and there's no blue in here because this is the Medicaid program, and the Medicaid program is not being touched, changed, anything. But as you look in the blue document, by moving some of this struck red language up in the statute, now the statute is structurally in 2. You have all of your public assistance programs and then Medicaid. So when you are looking in the statute at cash assistance, food assistance, child care subsidies, you don't have to go then to the very, very bottom anymore of the statute to see a definition or to see an extra item. So structurally, the statute through this organization says up top, public assistance programs, down bottom, Medicare. So you don't have to do too much flipping and too much reading to get to all the parts that only relate to the assistance programs. So that in black remains the same.
Representative Humphries.
Amazing job, really. That's just the way you've done this. But this is just a quirky question. J, Section J is Medicaid. So there's not an I. Do you not do I's because of the little I later on? Because it seems like H was right before.
Yes. So, Mr. Chairman, that is one of the things after reading through this the millionth time, there is no G. So assignment of rights, which is H, should be G. And then the next one, electronic benefits card, which is H, should be I. So that's an oversight on designation.
Okay, all right. I just thought maybe you don't. Thank you.
Yeah.
Representative Pickert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Jesse, on page 27, okay, number 4B, okay, on the blue copy only, there's no B there.
Okay.
There's a 4A, then
Just a little I.
yeah.
Perfect. So on the red and blue one, there is a cap B there, which is the one for everyone to know this is currently how it is drafted and sits in the system. So the cap B is there in the system. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Mr. Chairman, if I may go over one last item. In the red and blue draft, you will see that there is a section 2 amending KSA 39757. That is a cleanup of a statute, the only one we could find that cites to a specific subsection in this 39709. So we've deleted that subsection in there so that that is not an incorrect reference in that other statute. Yes, so on the red and blue, that'll be page 48 through 50.
Any questions, committee, for Jesse? So once again, going back to Representative Pickert's comment about that particular paragraph, can you, I think you found that it was not in the all blue draft, but you do have it in the system?
Yes.
Okay, so that's all good then. Is there anything else? Somebody jot notes down through the presentation? Go back with questions or anything? Thank you. That's great. There might be a little bit more, Jesse, but for right now, if you would like, Andrea, I would greatly appreciate, Andrea is from DCF. She did review this a little bit, I think, over the last day or two or three, or I think I gave you a copy last Thursday. Yeah. So would you like to kind of give a quick summary? And I think, yeah, anyway, go ahead. You got it.
Andrea Warnke, DCF Government Relations Manager. Agency had the opportunity to review this reorganization bill over the weekend, generally supportive. Once language is introduced, we'll want to look at it more closely to see if there are any policy implications or what we'll need to revise on our end. The only question / comment we really had, and this does go back to the comment Representative Pickert had, was on page 27 of the blue and red draft. We've broken down everything by fraud or drug screening, and so we were just wondering the rationale behind that 4A, B, 1, 2, 3, since that is only referring to food assistance, why or if the best placement is under the drug screening and convictions versus in the food assistance section. That was the only thing that we really saw from a digestibility standpoint. But always assuming that there's a reason that the revisers have chosen to do it that way, of course. But other than that, we think it looks great. It'll be much easier for people to read through this and utilize it.
So Representative Wagner.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Can you reference what page number would that be that you're referencing for?
So it's 27 of the blue and red draft. And there are different sections, I mean, throughout that felony and drug screening areas that reference one program area specifically. And so that was just a question or a comment that I received to bring forth. That's all we had.
Yeah, so I think it was in August, we were looking at the outline proposal, and that question did come up, and I don't know the right answer. Do you want to kind of go through your thought process on how you broke apart? It's mainly, am I correct, Andrea, it's mainly just the drug screening? That was the main one where it kind of references TANF and SNAP and, thanks, Jesse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So whether or not you want to include these provisions in a general drug screening conviction subsection or an assignment of rights subsection, while they relate to a specific program, there is no legal consequence by doing it the other way of including drug screening, assignment of support rights, et cetera, in the program specific section. This was presented as a possibility for an organization. So there's no legal consequence if the committee chooses to put these in the specific program related subsection.
So I'm just take a minute to think through the options here. So in the current or in the proposed language, under I think if drug screening and that element would go under the specific program area, it'd obviously add a certain length to that program section of the statute. But it would mainly refer to eligibility. Is that correct? So I want to get ahead of it a little bit here, but is it necessary to put a reference under the eligibility portion of the program section of the statute? Just say also, please see and reference the number, the statute number for other drug related.
Mr. Chairman, what you are suggesting would be that we keep that subsection F with the drug screening provisions, that is that existing statutory language, but include new beyond any existing language found in the statute, that the eligibility of cash assistance and then food assistance and then childcare subsidy shall be subject to the requirements of subsection F.
It's a little redundant, but because that does directly relate to the eligibility, rather than putting it all in there, do we do that elsewhere, or is that starting to get too redundant? If I was clear, Committee Representative Lewis.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, that makes perfect sense, just reference back. It's not going to add more than a few words to the statute.
So unless there's any objection, I'll ask Jesse to just add a reference to the eligibility under each program to the drug portion of the proposed language. Any further comments, questions? So how many hours did you put into this? Didn't count a lot. That's fantastic. But thank you very much for the work. And then just if you do come up with anything over the next few days, I would ask that you feel free to talk with Jesse or DCF, but also kind of feel free to swing it by and talk to me about it as well. And then if possible, we can get it into the language before it's officially introduced. Is that okay? Alrighty, thanks again. So where are we? One moment, please. So we did have a little bit more to do with the presentation on the interim committee on homelessness. We will punt this to Thursday. Also on Thursday, we will have a short video presentation on the topic of homelessness. And I think we also have one of the presenters from our interim committee, a national level guy. He is, gentlemen, he's agreed to come in and via WebEx and present to the committee as well. So all things homelessness and line up for this Thursday. With that, if there's no further comments,